thank you so much for that. Oh my. I feel like we just got filled up. Is that right? Yes. Okay, I'm so glad I'm feeling the same thing you're feeling. And just to have anticipation into the room, Fernay is over here about to deliver our goodies to us that we'll enjoy after this conversation. So it all feels right, it all feels right. There is some serious grace in this moment where we get to bring the past and the present together and make sure that we're planting the future together. And I'd love to invite Deb and Bryant to join us on the stage here. I want to start at the altar first before we have any words. I created an altar for every event that I do, for every space I go to. It's so important to me to bring into this space the folks that we are acknowledging, but also, more than human folks that we're acknowledging. This altar is filled with the ingredients, many of the ingredients that were just mentioned in this documentary that are nodded to in many of the books that Edna has written. And the process of foraging mushrooms or picking the herbs, like these are all part of this altar, along with one of those iconic photos from Bryant's collection of Edna Lewis. I'd love for us to just have that moment of acknowledging with the breath together the beauty of having the opportunity to be part of this story. Because I'm all up on the West Coast, so I'm going to do a breath in and a breath out with gratitude. Thank you for that. And I want to go straight to you, Deb. This was such a beautiful project. You put so much effort and time into this. I want you to tell us the first parts of this backstory of how this even came to be. You did episodes first, and then it became a full documentary at the conclusion of the airing of the episodes. Tell us about how you even got to the moment of first day of filming, let alone to the completion.
Yeah, so it was actually kind of serendipitous. A couple of years ago, I was interviewed on a podcast, and someone said, if you could do a documentary about anyone, who would it be? And Edna Lewis was my answer. And I have always thought that there are movies about Julia Child. There are HBO Max shows about Julia Child. Where is Miss Lewis's story? Where is that you can see it? And fast forward a year and a half later, Hannah Ayers and Lance Warren, who of Field Studio, they sent me an email and they were like, hey, we heard your interview. We're interested. You want to partner? And I was like, yeah, I hadn't even finished the email. I was already like, let's do it. When do you want to meet? Well, let's talk about it. I've got some ideas. And that's really where it happened. But it was just out of a genuine thought that Miss Lewis deserves to have that same sort of recognition and deserves to be on the culinary, Mount Rushmore, if you will, of American chefs.
I love that. And you really took it seriously. It shows. And also a testament to that is all the people that were in this film with you. Their stories of connection, of inspiration. And I want to turn to Bryant in that moment too, because I need you to tell the folks, what does Edna mean to you that you're on this stage right now?
Should I read my essay?
I would love.
Okay. So just to give it some context, I had been asked a number of times to write about or contribute Sarah Franklin's anthology about Edna Lewis. She asked me to contribute. And to be quite honest with you, I never felt comfortable or enthusiastic about contributing to many of these pieces because I needed to feel right. I needed to feel like it was the project under which Success would come was Black driven. And there are a number of things that kind of held me up. So when my good friend George McCalman published his book, Illustrated Black History, definitely need this for your collection, he invited me to write an essay about Edna Lewis. And it was the first time that I felt like, you know what, this is when I need to say my piece. So I'm happy to share it with you. I like super close.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to make it exciting.
Y'all can holler at us when we need to prevent disaster.
So yeah, I wrote this about 3 years ago, but so the title is Shrines to a Kindred Spirit. You'll find altars to Edna Lewis all over my home. I pour water, tea, and whiskey into my favorite handcrafted ceramic cups and bowls and place them out for her. I offer her fresh fruit and ancestor plates from our family meals. I light candles, arrange bouquets of calla lilies, irises, and assorted fresh herbs cut from our home garden, and burn frankincense and sandalwood incense to honor and remember her. Like many chefs of my generation, I hold Miss Lewis in the highest regard. She protected, celebrated, and elevated Black Southern food into the national consciousness. Miss Lewis also broke barriers for African Americans in the food industry, especially Black women. She deserves all her drinks, flowers, and fresh scents, and I'm here for any project that celebrates her work. I discovered Miss Lewis back when I attended the chef's training program at the Natural Gourmet Institute for Health and Culinary Arts in New York City. I was the only African-American male in our cohort, and my longing for Black role models drove me to research forerunners. When I read The Taste of Country Cooking, I was quite taken by Lewis's emphasis on community, her focus on seasonality, and the personal lens through which she wrote. I saw myself in her. We both came from loving, strong Black communities in the South. We both moved to New York City to cultivate our careers, and we both had immense pride in our Blackness. My adoration of and desire to learn more about Miss Lewis drove me to reach out to John T. Hill, a dear friend of hers and now mine. Who captured her essence in many of the gorgeous photographs you see of her, gathering tomatoes among sunflowers, wearing West African garb and jewelry while putting the final touches on a Christmas cake, and presiding over a table laden with simple, ingredient-driven Southern dishes. He saw her pass in my present, noting a similar light in us both, which deepened my connection to her. With Miss Lewis as my spiritual guide, I found my stride. I strengthened my focus on fresh food that makes the most of the season's bounty. I strengthened my pride in my African heritage, sharing it even more boldly. I strengthened my writing. Her approach to cookbook as memoir inspired me to add the texture of autobiography to my own cookbooks. I strengthened my commitment to doing all I could to shift power into historically marginalized communities so that they could be self-determined in regard to health, food, and farming. By design, my altars to Miss Lewis send a strong message to my daughters, Mila and Zinzi. Uplifting Black women is one of my core values. Throughout my 2-decade-long career as a chef and author, I've committed to a praxis of confronting the misogynoir, the potent mix of racism and sexism that Black women have to deal with day in and day out. I make good use of my privilege, power, and platform to champion and celebrate them. And by the way, Amethyst Ganaway, who was featured in the episode, my imprint 4Color, is publishing her new book that'll be out in a year and a half. And the title, y'all gonna love this, is called From the Rooter to the Tutor. And you best believe she's cooking anything you can think of. Amethyst is cooking in that book. Anyway, it's why I created a primarily Black woman leadership team when I founded Be Healthy, a food justice organization in 2001. It's why my first event as chef in residence at San Francisco's Museum of the African Diaspora, in 2015 was Black Women, Food and Power, in which we discussed Black women's historical and contemporary role in the production, distribution, and consumption of food and food knowledge. It's why in 2020, the first acquisition of my publishing imprint, 4Color Books, was a cookbook by Rahana Bizarret Martinez, a brilliant 16-year-old Afro-Latina chef whose spirit reminds me of Lewis's in so many ways. I understand that the actions I take in the present moment help create the future I want to see, and I will always ride for my sisters. And I mean all my sisters. While the shrines around my home memorialize Miss Lewis, they also pay reverence to every Black woman who served as an architect of American cooking. I often sit in quiet contemplation, imagining the lives of these ancestral aunties and sending love to them. So as we celebrate Miss Lewis and other notable Black people in this book, I encourage us all to recognize that behind every ancestor we uplift, there are countless ordinary Black folks who paved the way. We need something like the Tomb of the Unknown Brilliant Black Woman who held it down for their families and communities to commemorate the domestic laborers who toiled in the homes of wealthy whites, the home cooks who self-published books as early as the 19th century, and the Commis chefs in fine dining who didn't receive training and support from their white peers to help them advance in their careers. I see our entire Black family, from our great-great-greats to our children who are yet to come, alive within the concept of Sankofa, which essentially means to return to the past and retrieve what is useful, or to remember the wisdom of our ancestors as we march toward the future. This is illustrated in the Ghanaian Adinkran symbol of a bird craning her head backwards to gather a precious egg safely into her beak, feet planted forward toward the future. Zora Neale Hurston expressed it in this way: the present was an egg laid by the past that had the future inside of its shell. May Miss Lewis know that we carry forth her wisdom as we step into the future and work to create a better world with opportunity and recognition for all.
Thank you. Thank you. You absolutely just answered the why. And the why is deep and it's wide, right? And I want to start in that place with you, Deb, of acknowledging the source of Edna. We talk all about and hear about Freetown, and we understand that she's from there. It's her North Star. It's a place where she felt safest in her entire life. What's illuminated in other writings is the fact that to go back to the grandparents, her grandparents built a house there, and their house was the center of the entire community. All the other houses were built around their house. It was filled intergenerationally, and her grandmother specifically was a brick mason. As an enslaved person, that was what she did. She hated being away from her family, to the point that even as grown people, she'd check in on our babies. Our baby's all right. Like, I know I have to leave, I have to do something, but let me caretake at the same time. So there's this really deep well of, where she began was fortified. Mm-hmm. And the bonds of that family, her original family, was often through food. That it was about relationships. It was about relationships with the people. It was about relationships with the natural world. She, in her books, talking about whippoorwills and birds and insects and all this, all throughout her books. These are very intentional placemakers for her story. And so I want to turn this question to you of how does Edna stay relevant, given her background, her beginnings? She's still relevant. How do you identify that for her?
Yeah, absolutely. She's relevant today. I mean, families continue today. All of us have grandmothers and aunties and what have you, and things that we learn from and remember from our past and from our families. That happens with all of us. And I think it's so special to be able to, as I said in the film with Miss Nina, who was Miss Lewis's niece, mm-hmm. When you eat that food, immediately you are transported back to a very particular time, a very particular place with a very particular person. And so I think that's why it's absolutely relevant. And I always say, if you have older relatives, record them on your phone. Write down their recipes. I can't even tell you, my grandmother, who really inspired all of this in my life, I wish I had her recipes. I wish I had said, okay, so what's going on? And I never did. It didn't seem important at the time. But I guarantee you, every time I think about collard greens, every time I think about what she called chicken pastry, but everyone else calls chicken dumplings, there are very specific dishes that I go, Nana, and I can't replicate. I have tried for years to replicate these dishes, and I can't. And there's always something a little missing, and you can't get it back. Once it's gone, it's just gone. So I always encourage people to do that, because I do think that, what Miss Lewis did in those cookbooks, writing them down. In Black history, a lot of our things aren't written down. It's oral. How powerful is it that she wrote that down? And we have a roadmap for what folks ate. So that's why it's absolutely relevant. Write things down. Talk to your people. But yeah, it's absolutely relevant to today.
Oh my God, absolutely. And you got a little something that was handed out to you just now. Hello, Dominica. That was a postcard that is also something to take with you to spur on this legacy. And on one side of that, offering 3 questions that might begin this conversation with your elders in your life. so that this legacy is living, breathing, continuing. And other things that you alluded to into this documentary is the fact that Edna did everything. I was saying earlier, you can talk about anything when you're talking about Edna because she did all the things. Yeah. So Brian, we're talking about someone who, as a teenager said, I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to live my life.
Yeah.
Had moments of failing as a laundress, but succeeding as a designer, dressmaker, tailor. Had so many roles of and so many opportunities to find out where do I thrive, where do I find challenge. Getting so far as a restaurateur very much reminds me of Mary Ellen Pleasant. Who knows Mary Ellen Pleasant? Okay, a diaspora dinner on May 10th. We're going to talk more about Mary Ellen Pleasant with Tony Tipton Martin, so please come to that one as well. Mary Ellen Pleasant is the person in San Francisco who's like, I can do everything. I'm the first Black woman millionaire, laundress, banker, and also restaurateur.
Yeah.
This trend, this is a habit of Black women. It's really a very deep habit of Black women to show up in so many different ways to make not only your life happen, but also to satisfy all the interests, all the cravings, all the directions you're given. So this woman broke her foot in what year? 1975? I can't remember. In the 70s. That's what stopped her long enough to write her first book. It's like she had to break her ankle.
Yeah.
She was doing so much.
Facts.
So let me know about this scholarship. Like she started writing books with helpers, with folks that were, helping her in the writing process. The first one was good. The second one, awesome, because she was writing from her voice more authentically, perhaps. But can you give us a little bit of the insight into this world that she created, this canon she created? And it started in the 70s at, let's see, she was 40 at that point? Almost close to 50.
Yeah.
That's how she's often compared to Julia Child, like late bloomer.
Yeah.
But they're not late bloomers.
No, she's
Can you
right
tell
on
us about
time.
that?
She's right on time.
Yeah.
I think to Nicole's point, she was very cognizant about the need to keep record and to have something that holds the history and memory, not only of her family and the geographic location from which she comes, but just this kind of energy around regional cooking in the South and really kind of creating that infrastructure for us to be thinking more, granularly and not just these kind of sweeping reductive ways that I think a lot of people think about Black food. I'll say that a couple things. I think people need to practice cooking.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can fetishize the kind of, as Verda Mae Smart Grosvenor would describe, vibration cooking, where we're just kind of grabbing and not using a measuring spoon and a cup. And I think that kind of approach comes from an era where the practice of cooking was passed down in a much more strategic and serious way. I mean, and for structural reasons, people often, parents are working 2 and 3 jobs because they don't make a living wage. And so, there are fewer opportunities, I think, for people to pass it down. And so I say that to say, I think for me, when I think about Edna Lewis's cooking, she was clear that cooking is an art form that is both informed by both technique and intuition.
Yeah.
And so I think that having the technique, being able to understand some of the core principles of cooking then allows you to enter it with, kind of jazz where you're just intuitively freestyling and flowing. But, when I think about Edna, she definitely influenced me as a chef and as someone who is a cookbook author and just squarely rooted in the food world. But I would say more than anything, she inspired me as a person because she was a free Black woman. And it helped me, and I have the pantheon of Black men who have inspired me, from Fanon to Malcolm X to, just countless scholars and activists and just community people. But I think what she did, it just felt like there were so many parallels, like moving to New York City
Yeah.
and then just like sharing the radical politics and the fact that, she was a seamstress for Oscar de la Renta making dresses. It's just like, I think what she did for me is just show me that there are no boundaries to one's creativity. And I think so often, not just in like the cooking world, but just in field, there are these very siloed ways in which you think about showing up as a creative person. And I think she helped me to understand that I could like enter this and do whatever I wanted to do, have this kind of fluidity that sometimes brought together the different strands of the work that I did, and then maybe it didn't. And I'll say even me deciding to go back to get an MFA in my 40s was inspired by Edna Lewis, because it was like, well, what would she do? She would do what the F what she wanted to do, right? And if she felt like she wanted to get more training and develop a studio practice, then she would have gone out and did whatever she needed to do for that. And so, I think about her not just as a cookbook author and a chef, but just as a complete, whole, empowered human being. And that's most inspiring to me.
That is it. It feels so important to make that a bright point in this conversation. And, to speak to the technique of it all, again, get all the books, because, there's moments, again, on the postcard that we handed out on the backside is a recipe for her crispy biscuit. And that's something that we're going to have offered by Fernet today. And practice that recipe, cook that recipe. But you'll see in the instructions for her other biscuits, for example, she'll say, use a shiny pan. Like, there's these moments that are simple, but really important as cooks for us to hear these words of, this is how we make something delicious. And these are the very mundane choices, but they change everything when you're in relationship with something over and over again. It's like, I tried that dual pan. I'm sorry, it's just not the same. Like there's these things that she relays in the story that are so, so sweet to hear, because all of her writing feels like it's her voice whispering in your ear kind of experience. The other experience also from this documentary making, and you, both of you know this as writers as well, there's so much that doesn't get to the end product. So much that hits the proverbial, cutting room floor. Can you speak to some of the things that didn't make it into this documentary that you felt are important to mention today?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is we had the privilege to film with Dr. Jessica B. Harris in her home, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, we couldn't have it in there, but it is available online. It is a short online. And, it was interesting, her context working in publishing, or as far as, reviewing books and what that meant as a Black woman in the 70s, reviewing books, reviewing Miss Lewis. That's a perspective that you don't really hear a lot about either. We hear a lot about Judith Jones, who certainly edited Miss Lewis, and Julia Child, but it's also interesting to hear other perspectives. Yeah. And so that was one that I wish we could have kept in it. But again, it does exist online. You can watch it. Yes. But it was just, really beautiful to hear kind of like, this elder of culinary history talk about what Miss Lewis meant to her, and that was really special.
Yeah, she was at Essence at that point, right?
Exactly.
Dr. Harris was, and that kind of communication between elders feels like such an important point of this too, and really, gets at the heart of, I think, why or how you were describing how it came into the world. So if we're talking about, the choices that are made in this storytelling, I wonder what are the other pieces that stand out for you when it comes to really thinking about, this is a person who's connected to not only everybody in this documentary that's wanted to speak for her, and speak for, not for her, but to her, her life. For example, in the Carolinas, there are tours based on restaurants that have dishes from her books. You can go to 7 different restaurants on a tour and eat an Edna Lewis, dish. So what is it for you to sort of feel into this incredible mycelium network of folks that are inspired by Edna Lewis and making sure that this story is happening in their orbits in, whatever way? Like, how does that feel, and how do you also make that connection for other folks that this is really a life lived?
Yeah, I mean, first I wanted to say that when I talked to professional chefs and professional writers, I really did want to make sure that was all women. I thought it was really critical to have the female voice heard. I thought that was just critical. That was one of the first things that I said, as producer, we're not going to have dudes. Love dudes, but
Not this time.
but not today.
So that's why you didn't call me Dad.
That's what I'm saying. That is why. Honestly, real talk. Not even joking right now.
Didn't make the list.
I'm sorry. It
All
didn't.
good.
The chromosomes
I fully
didn't work
support
out.
that.
But I wanted to amplify that, because their perspective I thought was so interesting and it spoke to me directly, and I just thought that was imperative. And I wanted to talk to people who actually were inspired by Miss Lewis and not just, I kind of know her, but like people who had, either said to me or in media why she was like a titan to them. So I wanted it to be genuine and not forced, and hopefully that comes across to the viewer that these people genuinely have a deep admiration for Miss Lewis and a deep love for her. And so for me, it's weird watching myself, but when I'm listening to them, I'm literally like, okay, so what now? Oh my gosh, and then what happened? Because I genuinely want to know. We didn't submit questions beforehand. Everything was just kind of off the cuff. Nothing was scripted. So I just really wanted it to be as honest as possible, but also as respectful and show the amount of gratitude I have for Miss Lewis and have that reflected back on the screen.
That's it. Thank you. I feel like you accomplished that. Thank you for that approach.
And
It feels important.
can I just say that I love that you had those cooking scenes in there and just really focusing on the food. I feel like it just brought just another dimension to, I'm just like, we're going to be talking about food.
Yeah.
We need to have food present. So I appreciate that aspect of it.
No, and I, as y'all probably could guess, I'm not really much of a cook. So I was sitting there like, girl, this is questions. So a lot of that did get cut too. To answer your earlier question, like, they're like, oh, Deb, you need to cut. No, you don't want me cutting anything on screen. No, ma'am. No, thank you.
We'll get the B-roll version at some point.
I hope not. I hope not.
Oh, that's so
But I'm
sweet.
glad you kept those genuine reactions to the food in there. So you could have cut that out, but like I was like, all right, like I want this dish now.
That
You
lamb
really
that Mashama Bailey made. I almost like passed out. I was like, oh my God, this might be the best thing I've ever had.
I'm going to say that what I want to pull out of that is the fact that, you say in the film, she was 72 years old when she went to G&T. There's this moment of profound recognition of her skill.
Yeah.
She was asked to not only be, the chef at this restaurant, she changed a 100-year-old menu. And the folks that were, guiding this, the owners, and she became part owner as well. The level of trust, belief, and just deliciousness in that kind of decision feels really pivotal. And we need to name that as something that is unheard of.
Yeah.
And she accomplished that. It's about skill, it's about personality, all these things. But what do you attribute that to? That she just had this moment of like, yeah, I'm 72, I'm getting started. And I have absolute credential and confidence to go down this path, based on the work she'd had prior, but very much, this was an incredible moment. Speak to that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gajan Tullner is kind of like this Brooklyn institution. It was a steakhouse, and it would have a reputation for being super stuffy and all that sort of thing. And so when there's new ownership and Miss Lewis comes along, they really did want a chef who, with a name, certainly, to get people in the door, but they knew her skill set, as you said. And in that trust, I don't even think is that widespread even today, particularly with a Black woman chef.
Yeah.
And, that just is an anomaly in a lot of ways. And so they trusted her enough to decide what the menu is and have a large swath of, authorship. And so, this is a woman who is going to the farmer's market every day to decide what they're going to eat. And again, at 72. I barely made it through that day, as y'all saw. I barely got to the train that day. I was like, I can't do this. It's too hot. It was hot. But here she is, and she's doing that. And I think that maybe, obviously I don't know this for sure, but maybe she kind of felt like, oh, I might have something to prove.
Yeah.
She might have felt that. But what an honor to, be able to still cook those Virginia dishes, to not be asked to create something that was out of her wheelhouse, but to be true to her passion and what she was creating. That's a beautiful thing.
Can I jump in though? I just want to say that she shouldn't have been working at that restaurant. She shouldn't have been working in her 70s, right? And I think about I'm sure
She
most
should
of
have
you
been
heard
retired
that
and rich.
she should have been chilling on her own farm in Freetown, Virginia. But I think about I don't know if y'all recently heard that the singer Andy Stone passed away, right? And there were some interviews that were resurfacing, and in one of the interviews, she was saying that, it pains her so much that she has to be out on the road just to put food on her family's table, because she should have retired 20 years ago, but she wasn't getting paid the royalties and the compensation that she rightly deserved, because she was getting exploited in a way that many artists are exploited by these multinational music corporations. And so I think about that. I think about many conversations that George and I had when he was putting this book together about so-called Black polymaths, and people describe me sometimes as a polymath because I've done so many things. But what we talked about is that in many ways, a lot of Black folks are doing a lot of things because we have to do it just to make. I'm very clear that if I could do one thing and just provide my family with the comfortable middle-class life that they deserve, then I wouldn't be doing 5 or 6 things. And I enjoy them, but it's also, I would like to scale back. And so when I think about Miss Lewis and the end of her life, I don't know, because obviously I didn't hear if it was a joyous experience for her working in the kitchen, if she was having a good time. But the reality is that I think that she should have been at her point in her life, like our elders deserve, to be able to sit back and just have people come over and sit at her knee and just talk and enjoy life and not be grinding. And we all know the grind of working in a commercial kitchen. And that's hard for somebody in their 20s, 30s, 40s. I don't think that's the type of labor that a 7-year-old should be doing. So anyway.
It's true. And I'm grateful you lift that up, because the other part of this is, I was talking about, this is, Edna was famous.
Yeah.
And it's we have to keep making her famous over and over again because she's forgotten or invisibilized or, how many people knew about Edna Lewis before they got here? Yeah. How many people didn't know about her before? And there's that moment of why doesn't it stick? And I feel like that's what happened in her lifetime, that she was 72 and still, having to do something she loved, but it was toil. There's a constant forgetting over and over again, despite technique, skill, fame. There's still a proving that happens in that lifetime.
Yeah.
And so I just want all of us to continue to make her famous. Sharing her story, sharing this documentary, giving that moment of introduction to as many people as you can, so we can stop this fictional thing that happens in many people's lives of having to struggle because we aren't able to really attach a permanence to the incredible weight of beautiful contribution that they've made in their lives. I would love to hear from you, Deb, before we turn to our Q&A. I was saying earlier, one of my favorite things about this book is another mundane detail, but I have Black grapes on this altar. And this is another question for the group. Did you all know that cream of tartar came from grapes? Exactly. Today, years old, right? Tartaric acid is a side effect of the winemaking process. And so that's why we have cream of tartar. It is often used in as a baking powder kind of construct. Baking soda, cream of tartar, and Edna Lewis laments, "Oh, this double acting baking powder is like eating aluminum. Like it's not right." And so I love these kinds of moments where you can geek out with Edna. I love these moments where she's had so much experience and she's seen the different reactions and interplay of so many things on her plate and her palate. And she reminds us the original taste of food. And I'm wondering if there is something that you wanted to share about, in this process of eating these wonderful inspirations from Edna Lewis, why or how are we going to reclaim some of those gifts and lessons from Edna as we're on the track that we are on right now in our society, in our world?
I think, the first thing that came to mind while you were asking that is ingredients.
Yeah.
And understanding where they come from and supporting farmers if at all possible. I think about how, for example, I had eaten watermelon like from, just regular grocery stores. And then I had one that was grown in a field directly with no pesticides. And I was like, oh, I've been lied to for years and years. This is what it tastes like? Oh, I thought I didn't like it. Oh, okay, I do. But that's one of those things where, you are using ingredients that are seasonal, and you are, respecting the farmer that grew that for you. That's a lot of work. And I think that, one of the things I think about with Miss Lewis is trying to honor the ingredient when I do try to cook, or even when I'm just like, buying something and saying that to my daughter. I think now more than ever it's important to, really know where your food comes from. I think that's so important.
Yes, it really is. And the knowledge is a shifting target sometimes. But really having that commitment goes such a long way. I am wondering in this crowd of beautiful people, because you're beautiful, right? Don't just giggle. You know it. And it is really sweet that we give this opportunity to learn in real time from this documentary, from these two amazing folks, and to bring your words and bring your impressions into this question answer time that we have here before we get Chef McPherson's Minnie Bell's creations. And we hear from her about her menu. Because she's available, maybe? Okay, great. There's a hand? Okay. Go ahead.
Hold on, I'm going to use this.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, it was a front. Go ahead.
Did you have
Oh, yeah. I get to go first. There we go. First of all, thank you guys for being here. One of the things that I've been most inspired by Lewis's life and hearing you all speak is the idea of like just changing your careers 1,000 times. It seems like all of you have maybe changed your career quite a few times. Like, what would you say has been like the strength behind that? Like, what would you say gave you like the know-how to like go a different direction?
That's a wild question because I still have a day job.
Hey!
So like, I'm a communications director by day, and I do this like when I'm not working. So I can't answer that really well, other than the figuring out what Black foodways are and writing about them and talking about them and telling these stories. That's my passion. I truly believe that that's what I'm supposed to do. And so kind of to your point earlier, I would be doing this kind of thing, if I could, but I gotta pay these bills. That mortgage has to be paid too. So, I wish I could answer that other than it's still important to at least figure out what your passion is and try your damnedest to make it happen until it does. I promise you, this is sheer will. Like, I promise you to get this out into the world.
Brian, do you have a response to that?
I don't know if you heard it. Check. Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard is this kind of pioneer in the, I don't know, this is a bit reductive, but like self-help, kind of like manifesting your reality. And one thing he talks about is like living in the end. So having a clear sense of who you want to be, what you want to be doing, and how you want to be living your life, and holding that vision rather than getting bogged down in the minutia of like, how am I going to get here? Like, obviously you need to have a roadmap and a plan, but not like trying to figure everything out, because when you have that vision, then you allow the universe to start putting people and incidents and places and like energies in your path that'll keep moving you along towards that vision. And so, you know, it's a practice that I've had since my 20s. And I'll say that while I do a lot of things, they are connected. And I feel like there's this way in which I've been able to keep this thread throughout my work, whether it's like, you know, going to culinary school so that I can found this grassroots organization that used cooking as a way to politicize and engage young people around food issues. And then happening to meet someone who was a published author who wanted to write a book with me, and then getting into publishing and having this vision of one day I want to use the years of experience and you know, everything that I've learned for publishing to pass it on to the next generation. And then 2020 happening, and corporations and, you know, institutions had to perform, you know, some kind of like they like Black people, which we know is a performance now, because that window and those doors that were open in 2020 and 21 are shut tightly now. But just understanding that, oh, now this vision of this thing that I saw me do in my winter years, we need to get up on this now. And then getting this publishing in print and having the opportunity to, you know, publish all these younger authors. And then now going to, you know, grad school at Berkeley and getting this art degree, which is drawing on all the work that I'm doing in terms of like my studio practice, looking at cycles of resilience and transformation. And so I would just say, just like, especially in a historical moment like this, and I know I look young, but I'm 50. Just knowing, and it's something I tell my daughters all the time, is that with the rapid changes that we're seeing, there's no guarantee that whatever you imagine, that job, that career that you felt like is going to be the perfect thing that you want to do, that it's going to be there. And so I think having some practical balance of like delving into something that feels like it's going to provide you with, you know, stability and a comfortable life, but doing what you want to do and just being like joyous about following your passions, because I mean, who knows if any of this will be here in 2 decades. So sorry for the long answer, but just want to
I love this. Thank you so much. You did a beautiful job, you and the team. I don't know who the cinematographers were, but it was gorgeous the way they represented these regions. I think a couple of things that really stood out to me about her story is, first, that she met these moments in her life without her back being broken, so to speak. It was not that traditional narrative of all my life I had to fight. She had optionality about what she could have done and where she could have been in her professional life. And she chose this, not running from something, but running to something. I think the other thing that stood out to me profoundly was that as we think about the paradigm of women in age and career, that at 50 and beyond, your best work may be ahead of you. I got completely free when you just said, I still have my day job, because I still got mine too. So I love the parallels in that. I think the question that came up for me as I looked at Adrienne and Mashama and Amethyst in this story is, Miss Lewis's story was by and large not touched as much as others, but now in modern day we have social media and we're watching people's story come to life and evolve in real time. So what do you think the telling of the history of Black food that's being created right now looks like when we're not relying on, you know, abject records, but we're relying on things that we kind of saw come to life in real time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, that's actually one of the things that when I started writing about Black Foodways 10 years ago, like that was one of my things. I didn't want somebody else to tell our story, to be very honest with you. I wanted a chance to be able to put names to things that I had eaten all my life but didn't even think about, and realize there's stories to mac and cheese and James Hemings, and oh, by the way, there's a story for fried chicken and the women in Gordonsville, Virginia. Like, those are things that I had never thought about, but I was like, why does everybody know this? This is crazy, you know? And so I think that in modern days, I think, you know, it's a blessing and a curse because a lot of times misinformation can get out there. But it's still a blessing that people are trying to kind of tell their own narratives. I think that's a great thing. And I think that we should all be talking about that.
And real quickly, my apologies. I think there was the question here before you were in the front. Should have just been the deck in the queue. Will you have a question?
Yeah,
Oh,
she had a, you good.
It was
Sorry, where
Dominica.
are you-
Sorry,
Sorry.
Dominica was next.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh.
I'm keeping track, I hope, of the order.
Thank you so much. It's amazing work, and I'm just so proud of it. I just admire the work you did with this documentary, and thank you for bringing her stories and introducing us to the up-and-coming chefs. These beautiful. I'm ready, like book reservations right now. I'm ready to start traveling. And thank you for bringing us all together, Jocelyn. And I do want to say, keep practicing. I have a lot of issues right now with finding ingredients that remind me of my grandmother's kitchen. So it's not necessarily just a cooking style, and practice, of course, practice helps. But the fact that our foodways are changing so much, and it's hard finding, like when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, there was multiple styles of corn being grown in the U.S. Now it's just like dent corn. So it's like everything's starting to kind of flatten out, and it's really wanting this U.S. style of just everything the same. You know, if you want a road trip, everything should be the same. And it's like, no, we want everything different. It should be the terroir of each state. And that's what she was writing about. And it's not, and so we have to keep practicing and keep pushing our farmers markets to stay true to the heirlooms and what we have.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And yeah, just right here.
No pressure going after Dominica. Hi. Only one of the best chefs we have in the Bay Area now.
Facts.
From
Facts.
Bombera. So you come check out this woman's work if you want to see a through line.
Wait a minute, real quick, before you ask your question, I noticed your t-shirt and
I know,
someone
right?
in that documentary.
T-shirt.
Where can I get one of those old school?
As if it was a complete music concert.
Yeah,
No, that looked like kind of a No Limit style. Master P, that whole period, but with Edna Lewis. I'm loving that.
I will find you a link and I'm happy to share it to you. But what I'm about to say is that so many things that you said today really connected with me. I have a very different relationship with Edna Lewis than many of you in this room. I grew up in Berkeley, California, in the shadow of Alice and Chez Panisse. And I learned about Edna Lewis hand in hand when I needed to understand what Chez Panisse did. My grandmother brought home the Edna Lewis book. I never understood until today why so many of the recipes I work diligently at to copy from this book failed, and we were protesting grapes because of Cesar Chavez. So, but I will tell you, my grandmother's now passed, still on the fridge. I get articles cut out from magazines about Edna Lewis from my mother. I get sent T-shirts to celebrate. Food means everything in my family. And integral to that is her philosophy of cooking, her ability to tell stories about cooking. My family is very racially queer, so it was like MFK Fisher, Julia Child, Edna Lewis, and there was a pantheon of these women, including Alice. And the relationships to the farm. I think the first one we learned was the Chino Farms, where she would go, which was in Southern California, for Chez Panisse's food. But they've taught me how to live. They've taught me how to cook. It is so beautiful to see this story all wrapped up in one today. So one way we can keep in touch with the foodways that Edna Lewis helped show us is by being deliberate in our intention to do that and spamming your own child of people in the way that I lived, for whatever that's worth.
Right. Thank you for that. I think there's someone back here and over here. Yeah, there's 3 people.
Thank you. Hi. Deb, I just wanted to say that I heard you on a few podcasts the other week. And as soon as I heard your interviews, I was like, I must go to this event. I was so excited that you were coming to San Francisco because your passion and knowledge just like radiated through the conversations that you had. And so I just wanted to show some appreciation for that.
Thank you.
I just, the way that I got into learning about food and a lot of these wonderful chefs that we have been talking about, it's a lot through memoir, starting with Alice Waters' memoir, and then pretty much reading like as many as I can get my hands on. And Edna does not have one, as far as I know, right? And so I was just wondering, and I guess to the point made earlier about like how she was working so late, like perhaps she didn't get the opportunity to even have that memoir because she was working so late in life. But my question is, what would you want to hear about if she had had a memoir? What would be the thing that you would, the period of her life or perspective that she might have had that you are most interested in?
Oh, that is super tough. But if what immediately comes to mind is her time at Milton Place, I would really like to know what was going on in her inner monologue, as far as, not only what she was cooking, and she was learning at that time because she had really been cooking, Virginia food in many ways. And as Amethyst said, Charleston food is different. It just is different. And so I would like to know what she thought about that and learning how to cook new things and new ingredients, but also what that weight was like. One of the things that was not mentioned in the film is that the mill house where she lived on the 2nd floor, Black women and children actually were making the rice on the ground floor. And so what was that like? Obviously she knew her grandparents and that Freetown was established by, emancipated slaves. So what's that like being on that plantation and then take a step further and you're living on the 2nd floor where this forced labor is taking place? So I would like to learn, I would love to know what she thought about the food, her process, learning new things as an older person, and what that was like personally to kind of have that weight. Because when you visit Milton Place, there is a weight. You feel it. Another thing that you don't see is Amethyst, myself, and the crew were sobbing that entire interview. You can kind of see because my glasses are fogged up, but we had to cut so many times because all of us were in tears. It felt so heavy. But yeah, I would love to know about that particular time in her life. And, was it a financial decision? Is that what led her to go there? Or were there other factors? I'd like to know that too.
Hi. Thank you so much for all of this work, from the altar to everything that has been said today. And I wanted to say that I really appreciate you putting her voice, her actual voice in the film, because we can talk about her all day long, all around her, da-da-da-da. But when we get to the point where you actually hear her voice, I thought that moved my heart. I've heard a lot about her, and I have not had the opportunity to buy one of her books yet. And my question is for both of you, all 3 of you, is how do you enter into Edna Lewis? I know Jocelyn said, get all the books. And yes, I would like to, but I think there are several books, but which would you recommend?
Yeah, 100% start here. This is where you begin. And it's not a normal cookbook.
It's the second one.
Yeah, it is the second. You should absolutely get that in Lewis cookbook, but this is the first one you should read because it paints a very specific picture of what life was like for her, and it's like prose and recipes. Like it's so beautifully written. So it's not just recipes. Like you're in for some autobiographical kind of information. And very quickly about her voice, we only were able to get that audio in November. Our deadline was January that we had to deliver this project to PBS. And for me, I think that was Edna Lewis saying, okay, you did all right. You did a good job. Because we had been writing and trying to get this audio from the University of South Carolina. And so it was on a reel to like tape, like those old school tapes from the 80s. And they were able to digitize it, and we were able to work it in at the very last moment. So it just, it's what a gift to be able to put it, because that was not, we didn't intend to have it. We thought we weren't going to get it.
And the last word of the documentary was
Absolutely, it had to be.
to be remembered.
It had to be.
Wasn't that the last word?
Yep, to be remembered. Yeah.
How about the photographs? Where'd you get those from?
John T. Hill, like we wrote him and begged him and called him and Zoomed him and all of the things. Like, we really need these, please. What do we need? You know, I will try to cook you some cookies. Like, what do I need to do? Like, please. And he was so generous, and we were able to work it out, but we were able to get the photographs from him, which was great.
And we have one more question over here before we speak with Chef.
Hello. I was just thinking the story you said about trying to make chicken and biscuits or chicken and dumplings. And it reminded me of a story somebody else told me about how their grandmother used to make a pot roast that was delicious, and she always made it in 2 pots. And she would take the pot roast and cut off part of it and cook it in a separate pot. And she tried doing that, and she, you know, it came out kind of happy. She never understood why her grandmother did that. And the grandmother said, oh, it's because the pot that I have wasn't big enough. So it wasn't anything magical or mysterious. It was real basic. And I was thinking about you and the chicken and dumplings. Keep at it. Because you know what? Your grandmother, the person before her, their chicken and dumplings might have been trash, but hers were magical. You know, it's you know, and the last thing, I think part of what Edna's story teaches us is that we have to start cooking. I have 4 grandchildren, have 2 adult children, and it is in this day and time. It's an effort, but we have to start cooking at home. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how many cookbooks you have. If you're not cooking, it's not going to make any difference.
Say a word. Cooking and growing. For sure. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for all of your questions and your comments. Thank you so much. This is a deeply seated conversation and a group of people that are going to take responsibility for this experience. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's I'm feeling too. So thank you for that, for being accomplices in making sure that history gets told right. And another person that we got to be co-conspirators, Chef Fernay McPherson. Please come get that mic in her hand. We want to know everything. Why are you here talking about Edna Lewis through food, and what did you provide us today?
So thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm so excited. It's not on. Okay. I'm excited to be here. And reading a lot of Edna Lewis's story, like, the African American foodways always results back to family. And that's what inspired me to cook. The name of my business is Minnie Bells, and it's a combination of my great aunt, Minnie, who is 92 in 2 weeks, and and my late grandmother, Lily Bell. And those women always made these amazing meals. And when we think about food that we grew up eating, it's always referring back to family and getting, the things that they cooked. And I was happy that I was able to talk to my grandmother before she passed about different recipes, and my aunt, who's still here, and I can still consult with her. So our stories resonate in that way for so many people. And today, what I prepared is red rice croquettes with a buttermilk dressing. We have a pickled shrimp. And we also have a chicken salad made in Edna Lewis's light mayonnaise on her crispy biscuits. And then we have a sour cream pound cake, which is actually my grandmother's recipe, with brandied pineapples.
Yes! Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm excited for you all to try. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Oh, so appreciate it. We're going to keep the conversations going informally. We will, at this moment, go ahead and have a moment for this reception with this beautiful food. There's also in honor of Edna Lewis, just some deep homegrown lemonade. And it is sweetened with agave for folks that need to know that piece, but it is also this deep seasonality of the citrus, make the sun shine in the winter. And so please enjoy all that's offered there. It's as a real testament to making sure that our life is delicious, that our life is filled with things that absolutely give us life. And I would love to offer to Deb and to Bryant first, are there any final words you'd like to offer?
Just
I'm going to start with Bryant.
Oh, sorry.
I literally want you to have the last word.
I don't know if Ms. Lewis would describe herself as a food justice activist, but I think her focus on seasonality and, you know, eating locally and supporting farmers is certainly in line with the values of a lot of people who are working hard to create a more healthful and just and sustainable food system for everyone. And I think that it's just important for us all to get involved in this movement, especially as we're kind of hurtling towards collapse on many fronts, but specifically with climate collapse and, you know, the erosion of topsoils and just all the problems that have come because of our industrialized food system. I don't expect everyone to like drop everything and commit your life to this work like me, but I think this is something we should all care about for ourselves, for our future generations, for the planet. And so I just want to encourage, because I will say that it's been so exciting and encouraging to know that when I started this work in 2000 or a little bit before that, in terms of just delving into food justice activism, learning about the movements that preceded it and really trying to carry on these legacies, it's exciting to see more people are going to the farmer's market and buying fair trade and being more conscious consumers. But the problem that I've seen is that a lot of people stop there. They think that consumer action is enough. If I just go buy some organic lemons from Whole Foods, then, you know, I've done my part. And I do think it's important to spend our money in alignment with our values, but we can't spend our way out of this problem, right? And so I think that kind of individual consumer change is powerful and important, but I think we also have to be engaged as community members, because they're like food justice organizations and, you know, high-level NGOs that are working on these issues, and we should be involved in the direction of, you know, the movements, because the reality is that people living in historically marginalized communities, people who are dealing with some of our most crucial issues of today, they know it. They often have solutions, you know, to actually resolve these issues, but what they need are power and resources shifted into their hands. And so I think if we can help to ensure that the power and resources are going into the most vulnerable communities so that they can own and drive the change in their communities, then that needs to happen. And the last thing is just understanding that these are structural issues. So many of these things are baked into public policies, and we have to be engaged as citizens in terms of ensuring that the people, especially on the local, I know people, I've kind of given up on just like presidential elections, but on the local and the federal, on the state level, there's a lot, like our voices mean a lot, right? And so I think we have to be engaged in that way as well. And then, you know, I'll say this, we're at a point now where I think a lot of people are like, you know what, I'm opting out. What can I do? How can I create a life outside of this capitalist construct? How can I create a life that doesn't rely on fiat currency? How can I create a life that's about caring for my community in a moment where it's clear that these institutions that should care for us don't? And so I'll say, if you feel like you need to go off grid, you need to, you know, do it in community. Find people, start a cult, whatever you need to do. Just don't do it alone. And just know that this type of like communal building, community building is, I think, more important and vital than it's been in a long time. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that.
Well, first, I just want to thank everyone for watching this and for coming out. I'm so grateful. I will also say, that it was a bit of work to get PBS to get this to air nationally. I encourage you all to, tell someone to watch it on PBS. It is not lost on me that to be an executive producer as a Black woman is not the most common of things, to be able to have creative control over what you guys saw. That's not lost on me. And so in order for, PBS or, if we are going to air things on these major media outlets, people have to turn up and watch it. And so that's undeniable that people want stories like this. So I would encourage you to watch on PBS, have your folks watch on PBS, and just really, and not just me, other Black creators, because, the proof is in how many people watched it, unfortunately. Like, not how good it is, but how many people saw it. So please watch it on PBS.
Absolutely. Go ahead and keep lifting it up. And, I'd like to say that, the card that we handed out to you, I want to turn to those questions to end. And these questions are, characterized as how we can begin tracing our elders' legacies. But they can even start happening today with your seatmate or with the person that you tell this story of coming to this screening with. The first one is, which recipe do you make to express deep care? Just notice what comes up when that question is asked to you. Where do you feel at home and at ease? And which of your stories is the most important to share? Thank each of you for considering these questions and considering this life that we live together being so important that we say yes to today's like today. Thank you so much. Enjoy the food.